The night was quiet, filled only with the sound of crickets and distant voices of neighbors. Adebayo sat with his mother on the old wooden bench outside their small compound. They said nothing, but the silence spoke loudly of hunger, unpaid rent, and heavy hearts. Slowly, they returned inside. The cracked walls and the flickering lantern reminded them of their reality. A sudden knock shattered the silence. It was sharp, commanding, almost violent. The air grew tense. That night ended heavy, but the morning brought no relief. The landlord returned, his voice harsher than before, echoing through the compound like thunder. He shouted of rent, of time wasted, of eviction. Adebayo's mother pleaded for mercy, begging for just a little more time. But her words fell on deaf ears, and shame filled the air like smoke that would not clear. Later that day, Adebayo prepared himself with care. His only neat shirt was ironed, and in his hand, a worn envelope filled with CVs. He boarded a rusty bus heading to Ibadan, his chest heavy with hope. But office after office turned him away. Some mocked, some dismissed, some did not even look at him. From morning until evening, the doors of opportunity remained shut. His legs grew tired, but his heart grew even heavier. That night, he returned home. His shoulders sagged under the weight of rejection, but his mother's eyes carried a different strength. She sat him down, her voice steady and soft. She told him not to let the day break him, reminding him that delay is not denial, and that though men close doors, God still holds the keys. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Later, as sleep came, Adebayo drifted into a strange vision. He found himself in a shadowy forest, mountains rising around him. In the distance, a figure dressed in white appeared, its presence both calming and terrifying. The figure stretched out a hand, beckoning him forward. He reached out, and suddenly awoke, his body trembling, sweat rolling down his face as the lantern flickered beside him. In that dream lay a message. A sign. A whisper of the journey that awaited him. But for now, Adebayo did not understand. Tomorrow would come, and with it, shadows far greater than poverty. The morning sun rose slowly over Ibadan, but in Adebayo's heart, there was no sunrise, only questions. Who was the stranger in white? Why those words, "Your waiting is not in vain"? 2 weeks later, an unexpected call came. A friend from Lagos spoke with excitement, they're recruiting fresh graduates. Big company, big money. This might be your chance. With borrowed money for transport and a mother's whispered prayers in his ears, Adebayo boarded a bus heading for Lagos, the city of dreams and dangers. The streets of Lagos were alive, yellow buses shouting Ojulegba, men and women rushing, horns blaring. Adebayo clutched his small bag, wide-eyed and overwhelmed. The next morning, dressed in his only clean shirt, he stood among a crowd of applicants at the tall glass company gate. Inside the interview room, stern faces fired questions at him. And with a calm but trembling voice, he answered, "Because I believe integrity, hard work, and faithfulness are the pillars of lasting success. And I live by them." The panel exchanged unreadable glances. Later that day, temptation came. A friend whispered, "If you want the job, you must appreciate the manager. Just 50,000 naira. It's nothing compared to the salary waiting." Adebayo's heart sank. He had no such money, and worse, he knew it was wrong. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world, yet lose his soul? Mark 8 verse 36. That night, unable to sleep, he sat outside under the Lagos sky. And once again, the same gentle voice whispered into his spirit, "Be still. Your integrity is your key." Days later, he was called back to the office. The manager leaned across the desk, his words heavy, "To move forward here, you must be flexible. Bring something to the table." Adebayo's palms sweated. He thought of his mother. He thought of the landlord's threats. He thought of the soup pot at home, always near empty. But then the scripture echoed in his heart, "Fear not, for I am with thee, be not dismayed, for I am thy God, I will strengthen thee." Isaiah 41 verse 10. With trembling but steady voice, he said, "If it means I lose this opportunity, so be it." The manager laughed mockingly. "Integrity doesn't feed you here. Leave my office." He walked out slowly, each step heavy. The sun outside was scorching, but his heart felt colder than rain. On the roadside, he sat, tears threatening his eyes. Had he just thrown away his only chance? Or had he passed a test designed by heaven itself? As his head sank in despair, his phone buzzed. A strange number flashed on the screen. Slowly, he answered. A calm, deep voice spoke, "Adebayo. I heard what happened. Meet me tomorrow at 9 a.m. I have an offer for you." But who was this mysterious caller? And what kind of offer awaited him? "Fear not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee." That night in Lagos, Adebayo could not sleep. He tossed and turned on the thin mattress laid across Connor's hard floor, the heat pressing against his skin. The faint hum of a faulty ceiling fan above did little to ease his discomfort, and the cracked ceiling seemed to mock his endless worries. Outside, Lagos lived loudly even at midnight, car horns blaring, shouts echoing from drunken men on the street, and the thumping bass of distant music carrying through the humid air. Adebayo's eyes stayed wide open, his mind locked in battle. Who was the mysterious caller? Could it be another scam? Or could it truly be God's hand at work in his life? He whispered small prayers into the night, asking God for direction, begging him to order his steps. The more he prayed, the heavier his chest felt. Sleep would not come. The battle was not in his body, but in his spirit. The following morning, Adebayo found himself walking into a small cafe tucked away in Ikeja. The smell of fresh coffee and baked bread hung in the air, but it brought him no comfort. He sat nervously at a corner table, hands clasped tightly around his cheap phone. Minutes felt like hours as he waited. Then the door opened. A tall elderly man in a flowing white agbada entered, his presence commanding the room. His eyes were sharp yet strangely gentle, carrying both authority and familiarity. He walked with the dignity of a man who had seen many years, many battles, and many victories. He introduced himself as Chief Oledimeji, and with a steady smile, he told Adebayo he already knew of his refusal to compromise at the company. The chief's voice carried weight, every word rolling like thunder with calm authority. He praised Adebayo for his integrity, calling him a rare kind of man in a corrupt generation. Adebayo sat stunned. How did this man know so much about him? Chief leaned closer across the table, his agbada brushing softly against the chair. He spoke of a foundation he had built, a place for young men and women who refused to bow to corruption, who chose honesty even when the price was high. His voice lowered, almost like a secret being shared, as he told Adebayo that he reminded him of his younger self. With piercing eyes, the chief said God had told him that a faithful servant would cross his path, and he believed Adebayo was that servant. Adebayo's heart raced. The words sounded divine, almost prophetic. For a moment, it felt as if the heavens themselves had opened to pour out answers to his prayers. But deep inside, doubt whispered, could this be real, or was it another Lagos illusion dressed in fine agbada? Before his thoughts could settle, the door creaked again. Connor appeared, his shirt half-buttoned, his face tense. He pulled Adebayo aside with urgency, his voice low but harsh. Don't trust him, Connor warned. Lagos is full of traps. Big agbadas don't always mean big blessings. Connor's words rang like sirens in Adebayo's ears. His friend reminded him of the countless scams, the countless betrayals that flowed like dirty water in the city. Trust, Connor said, was a luxury in Lagos, and survival belonged only to the wise. Later that night, Adebayo walked alone through the restless Lagos streets. Neon lights flickered above half-closed shops, hawkers shouted prices into the night, and downfalls roared past, crammed with weary passengers. The noise was endless, the air thick with smoke and sweat. Yet, above the chaos, Connell's warning lingered: this city doesn't work with miracles. It works with smartness. That evening, Adebayo's legs carried him to Chief's mansion in Ikoyi. It stood like a palace among palaces, surrounded by tall gates and guarded doors. Inside, his eyes widened. Marble floors shone under golden chandeliers, while walls bore portraits of ancestors and shelves stacked with ancient books. Every corner breathed wealth and power. Chief welcomed him warmly and spoke again of the role he wanted him to play, his personal assistant, a position that was not just employment, but a path to grooming and greatness. The chief's words were rich, his promises flowing like honey. Then, almost casually, he handed Adebayo an envelope. Adebayo opened it with trembling fingers, only to find a check for ₦500,000. The sight blinded him for a moment. His heart pounded in his chest. Never in his life had he seen such an amount, not even in dreams. The weight of that paper was heavier than gold. But as he held it, a quiet voice stirred deep in his spirit: not all that glitters is gold. Test the spirit. His hands shook, caught between gratitude and fear. As Adebayo stepped out of the mansion, the night air hit him like a wave. Parked just outside, a black car sat silently. Inside, two men in dark suits watched closely, their eyes fixed on him. One leaned forward, speaking into a radio, his face hidden by shadow. Target identified. He has made contact. A cold shiver ran down Adebayo's spine, though he didn't know why. He adjusted his shirt nervously, unaware of the storm gathering around him. Was Chief Oledimeji truly a destiny helper, or was he part of something far more dangerous? That night, back in Connell's one-room apartment, the atmosphere was heavy. Adebayo sat at the small wooden table, the check lying flat before him, reflecting the faint glow of a flickering bulb. His face carried the weight of battle, faith against fear, destiny against temptation. Behind him, Connell paced restlessly, urging him again and again to take the money and end his struggles. His words were sharp, mocking Adebayo's faith. Suddenly, the silence was broken. Adebayo's phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with a message. His heart froze as he read the words. Meet me tomorrow at midnight, under the 3rd mainland bridge. I will tell you the truth. The room grew colder. Adebayo's chest tightened, his breath unsteady. Another mystery. Another voice. Another test of faith. Adebayo had to rush back to Ibadan immediately. His mother was gravely ill. The journey was long, his heart pounding with fear of what he might meet at home. Darkness lasts for a night, but joy comes in the morning. For Adebayo, the morning was finally breaking. Yet before the light could shine, the storm had to reach its fiercest roar. By the time he arrived, the night was heavy with rain beating against the leaking roof. His mother coughed weakly on the bed, her strength fading, yet her faith unshaken. She reminded Adebayo that God had a path for him, and he must not lose hope. Suddenly, a loud knock shook the door. The landlord stood outside in the rain, flanked by two men with sticks. His message was cold and final: by morning, they would be thrown out, no excuses. The men left, and Adebayo slammed the door shut, his chest heaving. At his lowest point, he felt the weight of heaven pressing down. But little did he know, the answer was already on the way. By dawn, Adebayo sat at his mother's side, eyes swollen from a night of tears. Then came another knock, this time from the postman. In his trembling hands, Adebayo held a letter that looked official. It was the very application he had prayed over and dropped in a dusty office 2 months earlier. His heart pounded as he read the words: "You have been selected as the new project officer with the Oyo Development Initiative. Report immediately." Overwhelmed, he fell to his knees in gratitude, tears streaming down his face. Beside him, his mother lifted her weak hands and whispered thanks to the God who provides. Later that morning, Adebayo walked into the landlord's compound with renewed strength. Letter in hand, he declared boldly that every debt would be paid, and reminded the landlord never to mock a man whose help comes from God. Shocked and speechless, the landlord could only stare as Adebayo walked away, gently holding his mother's frail hand. In the weeks that followed, Adebayo's life transformed. At his new office in Ibadan, he wore a clean suit, spoke with confidence, and was treated with respect. He carried his mother into a better home. He provided food for neighbors in need. And in the quiet of the church, he knelt with tears of gratitude, overwhelmed by God's faithfulness. One evening, he stood upon a rocky hill outside Oyo, watching the sun set in golden light. Tears filled his eyes as he whispered a prayer of surrender and thanks. Just as scripture says in Matthew 5 verse 14, "You are the light of the world." A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. From rejection to redemption, Adebayo's story is proof: when God writes your destiny, no man can erase it. Story is proof: when God writes your destiny, no man can erase it.